You never know who's watching. And my advice to anybody really, but especially if you're a leader in any space, for profit, nonprofit, education, entertainment, you name it, is to try your best to be who you really are and be your authentic self, because that is really what's gonna, as they say, your vibe attracts your tribe. What you exude is what you attract. On the flip side, if you're pretending to be something you're not, you might be attracting something you may or may not want to attract. But if you can find a sense of confidence and feel comfortable in being yourself, not necessarily looking like everybody else, not necessarily talking like everybody else, not necessarily doing what everybody else does, even though there's nothing wrong with doing group activities, then you just never know who you're inspiring, who's watching you, and who's following your lead or who's looking to give you an award. Like you just never know.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, my friend, Yasmine Arrington Brooks. Yasmine is the founder and executive director of ScholarCHIPS, Inc., a nonprofit that provides college scholarships, mentoring, mental health support, and a robust network to children of incarcerated parents, inspiring them to complete their college education. Here are 3 things I think you should know about Yasmine. Number 1, she is a 2023 CNN hero, which is just so amazing. Millions of people were inspired by the broadcast where she was introduced by Danielle Brooks, the star of The Color Purple and Orange's the New Black. I will have to find out what that felt like in a second. Number 2, Yasmine created ScholarCHIPS, which you heard about, as her social venture in the LearnServe International Fellows Program when she was a high school student, way back in high school. And now she has grown this organization, which you'll hear about, but she saw a need to provide resources for young people like her who had a parent who was incarcerated. And number 3, Yasmine is a millennial influencer and host of a radio show and podcast called Millennial Minds. Yasmine, you've been called many things, from CNN hero to a BET Making a Difference Award winner, and today we are thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Well, I have to say, you're a unique guest for us because I met you when you were in high school and have just watched all of the incredible things that you have done over the years. And so I thought I'd just ask, kind of to start, I mean, what do you know now that you wish you knew back when you were in high school and you came up with this concept for ScholarCHIPS as part of LearnServe? What do you wish you knew then?
A lot of things. What do I know now that I wish I knew then?
Yeah.
I wish I had known then how to set healthy boundaries, which when you hear gurus and people like Brene Brown and others talk about the importance of self-care and like taking care of your mind, body, spirit, soul. I wish I had known to how to also give myself grace the way that I had, and kindness the way that I so freely gave it and sometimes still give it to others. I wish that I was more astute in terms of best practices of running nonprofit organizations. I mean, of course, as you know, Anthony, I came into this space totally green, or if you want to say wet behind the ears. I was young. I was passionate about an idea, but I didn't know anything about 501(c)(3)s, board of directors, term limits, all of the, management, board management, all of these different things. And so I literally was building the plane as I was flying it, along with other other at that time adults who were trusted mentors in my life at the time. So those are just a few things, but there are a lot of things that I wish that there are a lot of things that I know now that I wish I had known then. But and also that it would be important for me to establish self-care practices, and
Mm,
I can get into that a bit later if we have time.
yeah.
But to give myself space and time to think, to be creative, and lastly, I think this hopefully will be a revelation or a reminder for a lot of leaders out there, that always being busy and having a full calendar Monday through Friday, or even 7 days of the week, that does not necessarily mean productivity. Rest, respite, rejuvenation, meditation, self-care, prayer, all of those things are productive. And if you ask me, necessary.
Yeah. You know, it's such a good reminder for leaders. I got a text from my sister the other day, and it was something to the effect of like, she knows me so well. Um, when you're resting, rather than this feeling of, oh, I should be doing something important or being productive, you could frame that as I'm resting to get ready for this thing I'm going
There
to
you
be
go.
doing. It's, productive
Yeah,
or
because if you don't, your body will. If you don't, I am a living witness. Like last year I was dealing with a respiratory. Nobody really knew what it was. I kept going in and out of the hospital, back and forth to the doctors. Ultimately, apparently it was allergies, but I was having coughing bouts, like my body was doing weird things and shutting down. And so a lot of external or extra stress,
yeah.
and like working so hard, and I speak of this from firsthand experience, because I have always been what one may call an overachiever, right? Like, and there's a root to that as well. But anyway, I digress. What you're saying is it's true. It's rest is productive, but it really does take, I think, a mindset shift from this kind of rush and pressure that I think this society and social media, like if we're not careful, it kind of sucks us in,
Yeah.
but we have to sometimes just kind of pull back, step away from it, and be very intentional about getting rest, and like not feeling guilty, like, oh my goodness, like I'm wasting my time. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, and I think it's important for folks to hear that message from somebody who is a CNN hero on this broadcast, on stage. Look, I want to, take a step back here. You've overcome a lot of obstacles in your journey, Yasmine, and I'll let you share what you want to about that. But you've really found a way to break through and reach people, reach donors, board members, young people, corporate sponsors, even CNN. And you got to CNN. What do you think is the secret that has allowed you, despite the challenges that you have faced, to break through and influence so many people?
I love this question. It's gonna get personal. So just the uh disclaimer on that. Really faith. My faith in God, and prayer, uh taking time just to isolate. And when I say isolate, I don't mean it in a detrimental, or I don't mean it in a negative kind of way, but isolate from always being out, always being at events, always like I had to pull. It has been helpful for me to pull back and to just listen to what I believe that my creator is trying to say to me. And what I've discovered is that he speaks to me in so many different ways, and for those who kind of have some form of spirituality may be able to relate. Like, he speaks to me through numbers, through people, through names. Like if somebody comes to me and their name is Caleb or their name is Jacob or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, or Ruth, like my best friend's name is Ruth. And so I began to look up the names of like these names of what the definitions are. And I've just become such I myself have done a lot of introspection work. Some people call it shadow work. But just like really reflecting over my life because I've had to heal. Like I've had to heal from a lot of trauma. So really that the secret is not really a secret, but that is the secret. And then if we want to go into more like how that translates, that inner work and inner experience, and what I believe my purpose is, that tends to translate when I'm communicating about scholarships on and even myself, on social media.
Well, and I'd love to sort of dive into this kind of element that you and I have talked about before around authenticity and meeting people where they are, and how that's something that has been a thread for you going back to high school when you started this program.
Yes, yes. I I've always well, let me say this. So I did some homework, Anthony, you guys gave me homework, which is good. It keeps us sharp. And he asked me, this question of like, what's the secret sauce? What makes you, in scholarships stand out? And how have you been able to, enroll and or amass, however you want to say it, support from a lot of different sectors and a lot of different people across generations, across cultures, across religious beliefs or non-religious beliefs, right? Is yes, authenticity, but I asked a producer that I have been working with.
Oh, you end up asking. Good.
I did, and what they said
This
was,
was the producer, just so people know the backstory.
well,
CNN Heroes kind of came to you, and a producer had been keeping an eye on you, and you said you were going to ask what they noticed about how you broke through. Am I remembering that right?
yes, you're right, but actually, this producer is not the producer from CNN.
Oh, okay.
This is I'm not gonna spill the tea,
Okay, okay. It was something
but
else.
this is a producer of a national show.
Okay.
Let's say that. And she said, let me see if I can find what she said. Sorry, I want to make sure I get this correct because I
I
don't
want a
want to
misquote.
paraphrase and get it wrong. She said, because what you do is unique, untapped, and overlooked. She said, and I can talk about how your personality shines through. So you're absolutely right, Anthony. When you were the story goes that back this was pre-pandemic, and I had been nominated for CNN Heroes because folks know that it's just like all the other awards, in the United States. Is a lot of it is through by nomination, and so CNN Heroes has an open nomination form. I was nominated. I had someone called me from CNN Heroes studio, and I had one interview, and after that, I didn't hear anything. Right, so no problem. So years go by, and I was nominated. I want to say at the end of 2022 after going through the whole process with CNN, and I end up at the CNN top 10 under 10, I meet a woman and she just smiles so big and she's like, Yasmine. And she gives me this big old hug. Mind you, I don't know who she is, right? And I'm like, hi. And she said, Yasmine, she said, I'm going to tell you, I have been watching you. She said, we have known about you. I've been watching you for years, and I did not, up until that point, I did not know her. I didn't know who she was, but I learned later that she was advocating for me in the boardroom, right? And she was like, as I guess they go through, however they go through their prospecting, my name continued to come up. And so my I guess I'll say nugget of wisdom, but it's really it's through a lesson that I learned through this process, is that you never know who's watching. And my advice, take it with a grain of salt, but to anybody really, but especially if you're a leader in any space, for profit, nonprofit, education, entertainment, you name it, is to try your best to be who you really are and be your authentic self, because that is really what's gonna, as they say, your vibe attracts your tribe. That is really what's going to attract, if anybody's into, like, the idea of like manifesting, right? Like, what you exude is what you attract. So if you are, on the flip side, if you're pretending to be something you're not, you might be attracting something you may or may not want to attract. But if you can find a sense of confidence and feel comfortable in being yourself, not necessarily looking like everybody else, not necessarily talking like everybody else, not necessarily doing what everybody else does, even though there's nothing wrong with, doing group activities, then you never know who you're inspiring, who's watching you, and who's following your lead, or who's looking to give you an award. Like, you just never know.
Yeah, you never know who's watching. That's so true. And I think for leaders, that's a good lesson because their own team, out in public, whatever it is, and just being your authentic self is the answer there, because otherwise it takes a lot of energy to not be who you are all the time too, doesn't it?
It does. And I'll say this too, don't be afraid of critique or critics. That it's gonna come, it's gonna happen. Not everybody is going to agree with every decision you make as a leader. Not everyone's going to agree with everything you say. And I mean, if we're in the wrong, then I think there's some space to maybe have some introspection or even conversations with whoever is across the aisle. But I'm just such a big advocate of being one's true self, and letting your uniqueness and your authenticity shine through. Because first of all, it just makes the world a much more cool, interesting place. So I'm just really big on that.
Yes, I mean, your CNN hero speech was so beautiful. I mean, you did
Thank
such a
you.
wonderful
They
job.
only gave us 15 seconds, so it had to be quick.
I mean, but you honed it. It was good. And one of the things that you said, you reminded the audience that neither our parents nor we are defined by our worst moment. I wonder if you could sort of talk about why that's such an important message.
Absolutely. So for those who are in the criminal, for lack of a better term, I'm just saying the term because that is the term that we tend to use in the space, in the criminal justice space and or social justice spaces, even some social innovation spaces that sort of kind of overlap. For people who are incarcerated or returning citizens, or people who serve children of incarcerated parents, or people, right? Like, anybody, any organization that has been that is supporting people who've been affected by incarceration, we use that term criminal justice. But oh, I'm sorry, you will hear a lot of us say, you are not defined by your worst moment. A lot of the people who, and I'm just, it's so humbling, and it really has opened my eyes and changed my life from a lot of different vantage points. One of the organizations I came in contact with was the Just Leadership USA program, or JLUSA. And I was one of only two in the entire cohort who ourselves had not been incarcerated, but we had been impacted. Everyone else had served serious time. And to hear their stories, and just, I mean, can you imagine being in a jail or prison for 15, 20, 30, 35, 40 years, and so it was just humbling just to be in a space with them, the fact that they had survived all of that, and they were basically rebuilding their lives after incarceration. And so we usually use this kind of terminology that you are not defined by your worst moment, because this is a population where people, they are typically judged by the worst moment or the worst decision they made in their lives that has now changed their lives. And so the idea behind that is you don't have to be, you don't have to limit yourself to that box, to that one moment in your life that at this point happened 15, 30, whatever plus years ago. And you have the agency and you have the ability to make different decisions and change your own life. Of course, it sounds easy, and it's not as easy as said, but it's really a mindset shift. And so in society, in this society that we live in, there tends to be a lot of stigma and taboo and what we call a burden of shame around either having been incarcerated or having a family member who's incarcerated. And so my goal in that 15-second or 20-second speech was to let incarcerated individuals, returning citizens, children of incarcerated parents, their families know that I see you, we see you, you are worthy. And then I also said, you're worthy of every beautiful thing that life has to offer. And so it basically was just like saying that I see you and that you're worthy. And sometimes we don't always, in our subconscious, we don't always believe that we're worthy of love, that we're healthy love, that we're worthy of financial freedom, that we're worthy of whatever it is, that's positive. So that was like the message that I was trying to get across, also to young people who have incarcerated parents, that they don't have to be ashamed of this part of their family story, of their personal story.
When we talk about the idea of influence, now, how do we influence other people? That message, I think, is a really powerful one, because whether it's what you're saying or whether it's maybe what you're doing with the scholarships that you're providing through ScholarCHIPS, helping someone see that they or someone else isn't defined by their worst moment, helping them maybe overcome that sense of shame, unlocks potential that otherwise might have been, behind a wall or behind a door.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of what you've learned as you went from a high school student with an idea, not knowing anything about 501c3s or boards, to now running a 501c3. So
Yeah.
you're raising money and working with corporate folks and you have a board. What have you learned about the power of influence? And, what advice would you have for other leaders from those lessons that you've learned?
Well, first, I want to say that from my perspective, influence is a delicate thing. And I think it's something, influence should be stewarded with care, because I can't tell you how many times, and with all due respect, I'm just speaking my truth and my experience, particularly within the Black church. But this can happen in any sector, as well as some corporate spaces, that, if a leader is not careful, because people tend to, we look up to certain people in certain positions, because whether it's because of the accolades that they've accumulated, or, the success that they've had, or traumas and obstacles that they've overcome, or maybe they're just an amazing orator or writer, or they, a successful business person, whatever it is. But, when we're in these seats of influence, and with influence comes power. It does. And so I think we just have to be mindful and gentle. We're not going to be perfect, but never, I say never, well, one of the, I think it's like, what is it, 48 rules of power, laws of power, rules of power, is to never underestimate your opponent. Now, you shouldn't necessarily be seeing people as your opponent, but like, I would say, like, if you have young people that are looking up to you, maybe they're your proteges or mentees, to just you know, love on them with care, but be careful not to say things or do things that could harm their self-esteem, right? Their self-esteem and their sense of confidence. And actions speak louder than words. So we can say to someone, I support you, I'm here for you, but your actions say something totally different. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced that. So and I'm not perfect, but with the young people, particularly with the young people who are coming up behind me and coming up behind us, and even mentors that I had or have, I really try to be delicate, and always try to be a positive. Everything that I say, I try to encourage them, even if they're going through a hard time. And I try not to judge them based on the situations they're in, because if we all think back to what we were like at 20 and 21 years old, we all made some silly decisions, right? Like, we all found ourselves in some probably compromising circumstances. That's just kind of a part of life and living. And so anyway, that's like my biggest piece of advice, is that we treat our influence delicately, and always try to be a source of positivity, and not try to manipulate, guilt trip people into doing things, or manipulate or guilt trip people or gaslight people. Like, those kinds of things are toxic, and I have run very, very fast from anybody who does any of those things, because those are not characteristics that I want to exude as a leader. So I really went down a rabbit hole. I don't even know if I answered the question.
No, you
So if
did.
I didn't answer it, just tell me, Anthony. But that's like my biggest thing about influence.
My takeaway from that, and I like the way you said it, is to treat it delicately, and it goes back to when you said, you never know when people are watching, but if you are the influential leader and somebody's looking up to you, then, a comment or something negative or whatever, even though, of course, we all make mistakes, can have a disproportionately great effect on someone who might look up to you. And I think that's what an important reminder, because, you know, you have a burden to be more careful and more thoughtful and more intentional when you're a leader and you have the ability to influence others. So it's a responsibility, but I mean, it's a power, but also has a responsibility, I guess, which I think is I don't know, maybe a line from a superhero movie, but it seems appropriate.
Yes. Oh, and I actually, on a positive note, Anthony, I have two more things I want to share, and I'll be much more succinct. I think advice in terms of influencers is be dream big and be bold. There's a saying that goes, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not thinking big enough. And I want to encourage leaders to not lead from a scarce I can almost promise you that if you have a scarcity mindset and you're afraid to give, like if you're afraid to donate, if you're afraid to give someone a grant without expecting it back, or pay vendors, and pay well to either work for you or to partner with you, you're not going to grow. And so operating from a scarcity mindset and being, thinking that like always thinking in lack, like, well, I don't have enough money, or we don't have enough money in the budget for that. Okay, well, if it's something that you need and your company could benefit from, then create a line item in your budget for it, right? Or just, I don't know, just be open-minded, be creative, be bold, and it may be scary for some people, but try to help them to see your vision, or just maybe give them a taste of it, and let them see how it turns out. And if it turns out well, then maybe you'll be able to get more buy-in. But as a leader, I believe, especially when you're doing something that's helping the community in one way or another, it's important to just be creative, be bold. When you say you're going to do something, do it, and do it big. Go big or go home.
Well, you had I mean, look, the program that you did in high school, LearnServe, there are all types of social ventures that come out of that. Some folks
Yes.
come up with an idea to have a club at their school and meet one time to talk about an issue. You said, I'm going to help people get through college. And, you made the commitment before you had the resources to do it. And then, so you had that bold vision and commitment, and that is what got other people on board. If you'd waited till you had the resources to do it, you wouldn't have ever gotten those folks on board. So I see exactly what you're saying, and I see how you've lived that from a very young age. And not too many people can do that. And so I think that's pretty cool. I want to, ask you, Yasmine, your work obviously is a personal passion, and it's rooted in your own personal story. And I wonder how you balance maintaining your own personal brand, because you're out there doing lots of stuff, with your professional brand in this age of social media. Because I know, earlier you alluded to, self-care. And so, how have you navigated that? Because part of the success of scholarships is you being willing to share your personal story, having a parent who is incarcerated, being raised by a loving grandmother. I mean, it's like this is on CNN for everybody to see,
Yeah.
and at the same
Yeah.
time, that is not always easy to do, to put yourself out there like that. So I wonder if you could talk, and you're a young person, so you understand digital and social media, and that's been a way you've gotten your message out. So anyway, how have you balanced that?
Yeah. Honestly, it's always been a challenge for me, and it's something I think about quite frequently, because the questioning sort of, I think, maybe subconsciously or even consciously in my mind is, where does scholarships start and where do I begin? Or where do I begin and where do scholarships end, right? So, my grandmother used to say to me, "You are scholarships. Scholarships is you," right? Now that is that, in a sense, that is true. But I also, at the end of the day, I'm my own individual. I have my own pet projects and passions and hobbies and dreams, and like all of these kinds of things that may or may not relate to scholarships. So one of the things in terms of with my personal brand, I definitely have aimed to be, just as I mentioned earlier, share some of my uniqueness. And one of that is, like, I don't know what you would call my style, um, but I like, maybe I'll call it like bohemian chic, or I don't know, it's something like that. It's I like statement pieces, like I like bold earrings. I love colors. I love fabrics, like different fabrics, satin, cotton, all these different, like latex, all these different textures, patterns. And so when you look, if anyone looks at my social media, I think one of the things you could tell is that I love fashion, and that I'm not afraid, and as a whatever you want to call heavy set, full figure, plus size woman, that's not something that, like, maybe, especially when I was growing up in the 90s, and even before, probably in the 80s, like, that was unheard of. It was like, if you were a certain size, you wanted to wear loose clothes, and you wanted to wear black because it is supposed to be slimming. But I really defy the odds, a lot, in a lot of instances, with just who I am and being vocal. I try not to be too controversial, and there's a lot of topics that I will not talk about publicly, just because, they might be polarizing topics, right? But I do share a lot, as you mentioned, Anthony. I do share a lot of my personal story online. I've pulled back a little bit as I've gotten older, now that I have a family and I have other people to protect and to think about. And also realizing that, not every, as there's a saying that goes, not everything is for everybody. So I have literally shifted, like with each of my ages, like from a teenager, I showed up one way. As a young adult, I was actually pursuing modeling while I was running scholarships, which, oh my goodness, was extremely confusing to everybody, including myself. And I was also like, I was trying to figure out, like, excuse me, what the hell, what am I doing? Like, who am I? What am I gonna do? What, and so I was basically like trying a lot of different things. I also tried to go the ministry route, like to be try to be a pastor or preacher. That, and they were like, but you're modeling and you're wearing bathing suits. Like, what are you doing? So I have really just been experimenting, to be honest. And I think that me being authentic and transparent about the good, the bad, and the ugly, that for some people, some out there somewhere, something resonates.
Mhm.
And I maybe even my confidence, which took a while. I had a community of people in different seasons of my life who kind of helped me to see my worth and kind of build this healthy sense of confidence, and positive self-esteem. So maybe sometimes people might see my personal brand, and they're like, yeah, yeah, I wish I could wear that, or you know what, she wore that, so I'm gonna wear that. And if Yasmine can do that, I can do that. Like, I've literally seen people copy me. And it used to agitate me. Like, I used to get so upset, but then I was like, you know what? If I'm influencing people in a positive way and they're doing positive things with it, whether or not they give me credit, whether or not, even if though it might be a little annoying, I'm like, you know what? You go for it. Because you're helping other people and you're doing something positive. And so I have my own personal brand, which I call Yazzie Speaks, which is, it's like me, it is what it like. Yazzie, that's my part of my personality. And then Speaks is me speaking out and being authentic and transparent, and having certain conversations, which is how the podcast was born, the radio show was born. My YouTube, I have a YouTube channel, right? Like, all of these things. So I don't really know the answer. I've really just been experimenting my whole life, and some things stick and some things don't.
As we wrap up, I want to just ask you one final question, which is, I know a lot of chief influencers, a lot of leaders, they get inspiration from outside of just the normal zone they're in, like, the nonprofit world or whatever. And I wondered if you could just share any place that you've gotten inspiration outside of maybe the expected areas we might think about.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, definitely some talk show hosts. I definitely have gotten inspiration. I follow a lot of actresses and actors on various social media platforms. I A lot of YouTube. There's certain YouTube influencers who talk about spirituality. And all of some of the things that I've mentioned that they touch on, and they talk about the importance of self-care, and changing your mindset and all of those things. Obviously fashion. I follow a lot of what they call plus size or full figured fashion models. Um, yeah, like, and also some athletes and business owners, and of course the obvious, like, I do follow some social innovators and not nonprofit founders, as well as some folks who are doing things in corporate America. So I kind of get a taste of a little bit of a lot of things.
Well, and it makes sense because you have your own corporate audience as well as, the recipients of the scholarship. So you kind of have that broad range. For folks who want to learn more about you, Yasmine, or follow you or scholarships, where should they go?
Yes, absolutely. So for scholarships, definitely our website is ScholarCHIPS, and that's C as in cookie, CHIPS fund.org. Again, that's scholarchipsfund.org. You can find scholarships on most major social media platforms. Twitter, or well, X is now at scholarships. Instagram is at ScholarCHIPS Fund DC. On TikTok, it's at ScholarCHIPS Fund, right? So if you type in ScholarCHIPS Fund, we will pop up. And we're also ScholarCHIPS is on Facebook and LinkedIn. For me, most platforms, if you type in Yasmine Arrington or Yasmine Arrington Brooks, I'll pop up. On X, it's Yazzie Speaks, and then on like TikTok, Instagram, and some others, it's Yazzie Speaks 3.0, and also YouTube. Yazzie Speaks Volume 2. I definitely want people to check out my YouTube page because it's different for me, but it's something that I'm trying to explore.
You are all over the place. You're doing so much.
Ah!
It was a thrill to see you on CNN as you were recognized as a CNN hero.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the impact that you've made and that we know you'll continue to make. And we're grateful that you took some time to be with us and excited to name you a chief influencer. So congratulations.
Thank you, Anthony. This was a fun interview. It was so much fun.
I'm glad that you were with us. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a chief influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.